I call to order the regular meeting of the Mount Pleasant City Commission, Monday, April 28th, 2025 at 7 p.m. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Mount Pleasant City Commission recognizes the Anishinaabe, whose ancestral lands the city stands upon today. We acknowledge the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe and recognize that the three bands of Ojibwe, Saginaw, Black River, and Swan Creek have resided on this land for over 200 years. Our acknowledgement of the full history of the tribe and our commitment to be good stewards of these ancestral lands is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those ancestors who came before us. We give thanks to the generous care with which the Anishinaabe and those members of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan have given and continue to give to this land and our community. Clerk Wixon, will you please take the roll? Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Okay, at this time we will move to proclamations and presentations. The first is a proclamation in support of Memorial Workers' Day, April 28th, 2025. Whereas on April 28th, 1971, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, went into effect, promising every worker the right to a safe job. And whereas every year on April 28th, communities and work sites around the world honor friends, family members, and colleagues who have been killed or injured on the job. And whereas the U.S. Department of Labor and the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that Michiganders have died while on the job at an average rate of 147 people per year over the last decade. And whereas the 2024 National Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries found a worker died every 99 minutes from a work-related injury. And whereas it is appropriate to honor the memory of the courageous and dedicated members of Michigan's labor force who have been injured or disabled or have died as a result of workplace accidents. And whereas we remember those who have died in workplace catastrophes, suffered occupational related diseases, or have been injured due to dangerous conditions. And whereas recognition of the integrity of Michigan's workforce and its achievements on behalf of the economic growth of our state is necessary. And whereas the Mount Pleasant City Commission wishes to pay tribute to the workers who have died or been injured or disabled in workplace accidents. We honor the contributions of Michigan's workforce and call for increased workplace safety. And whereas the Mount Pleasant City Commission renews our efforts to seek stronger workplace safety and health protections, better standards and enforcement, and fair and just compensation. And we rededicate ourselves to improving safety and health in every city workplace. Now, therefore, I, Boomer Wingard, Mayor of the City of Mount Pleasant, on behalf of the City Commission, do hereby proclaim April 28th, 2025 as Workers' Memorial Day in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and urge all citizens to recognize and honor the contributions of Michigan's workforce and call for increased workplace safety standards. At this time, we'll have an introduction of Treasurer Melissa Garcia. Finance Director Lauren Pavlovsky will present.
Melissa Garcia joins us from the City of Mount Pleasant Finance Division as the City Treasurer as of April 14th. Melissa brings a wealth of experience in municipal finance. Most recently, she served as the Water Services Manager for the City of Midland, where she worked directly with customers on billing issues, assisting the clerk with customer inquiries, prepared the department's annual budget, and conducted audits of the water meter readings. Prior to that, she was the Deputy Treasurer for the City of Saginaw, where she oversaw and implemented the city's uniform income tax ordinance, managed the collection, custody, and disbursement of the city revenues, and led the daily operations in the Treasury Division. We are excited to have her and know she'll be an asset to our team in the city of Mount Pleasant.
You.
All right, next on the agenda, we have an introduction of water plant operator Chloe Hutig. Thank you. By Director of Public Works Jason Moore.
Good evening, Commissioners. I've got a couple introductions this evening. First up, we've got Chloe Hutig. She's the newest member of our water department team. She started as a water plant operator on April 7th. Chloe's been a long-time seasonal for our Parks and Recreation Department here at the city. She's a graduate of Mount Pleasant High School and has a Bachelor's of Arts in Environmental Studies from the University of Michigan. Please join me in welcoming Chloe to our staff and wishing her great success.
Okay, and I believe Director Moore has the introduction of street maintenance specialist Colton Jacobs.
Next up, we've got Colton Jacobs. Colton started with our street department as a street maintenance specialist on March 17th. Colton comes to us from Elbaugh Excavating, where he was an equipment operator and crew leader. Colton also was a seasonal for the city from 2015 through 2017 before working with Elbaugh Excavating. Please join me in welcoming Colton to our staff and wishing him much success as well.
Okay. Next item, we'll have a presentation recognizing 2025 Mount Pleasant Citizens Academy participants by Director of Planning and Community Development, Director Manuela Pawadeco.
Hi, good evening, everybody. This is a very exciting night for me. This is the 9th Citizen Academy, which is incredible. We're reaching our 10th anniversary soon. So we have here 18 participants who had an inside look at municipal government at the city, including presentation from staff and tours of the city facilities. You recall that the academy includes 7 2.5 work sessions with dinner served prior to each session. And I'm going to be calling each one of the participants' names, and then we can give them a round of applause once we have all of them here. So the first name is Amanda Brake. Blake Cahill. Brad Hull. Brian Wisniewski. Brittany Smith. Caroline Roberts. Donald Smith. Grace Van der Mark. Josh Simon. Caitlin Rauch. Kyle Shaver. Lauren Cahill. Liberty Lundy. Mary Dipstra. Renee Cade. Sarah Phillip. Shara Paul. And Sharon Wisniewski. So please help me spread the word. Next year in February, we'll start the 2026, the 10th Citizen Academy, and we'll be welcoming applications towards the end of the year, beginning January. Thank you so much.
Okay, next item on the agenda, we are going to have a presentation on EPIC MRA Workplace Climate Survey. This will be presented by Bernie Porn of EPIC MRA. So I believe, is Bernie on for Zoom? Jason, do you see? On Zoom? Yeah. Perfect. Not seeing any? We cannot on Zoom. Gotcha. If it's oh, attendees.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Bernie.
Yes.
And I can see you, and you can see me now, okay?
We can see you as well. Thank you.
Okay. I appreciate you inviting me to join your commission meeting tonight, Mayor and members. I am Bernie Porn. I'm president of EPIC MRA. And I am filling in for my partner, Kelly Sullivan, who would otherwise be here. He had to make a presentation, I think, down in Grosse Pointe for a appointment that he had tonight. But we are going to be conducting a online survey of your employees, and we have done that with great regularity with the employees of the Board of Water and Light. We've also conducted online surveys of the largest union members with the MEA, UAW, AFL in Michigan over the past several years. And so we're very accustomed to conducting online surveys. Most of our surveys are conducted via live interviews with live interviewers, and over the years, we've increased the number of people who we interview by cell phone. And now I think our most recent statewide survey, we had 86% represented by online or by cell phone participants. But this is not what that survey will be. It'll be online among your employees, much like we conducted a survey not far from you for St. John's School District, where we did an online survey for parents, employees, and not only all employees, but also teachers, to get their opinions about a number of different policy issues that St. John's schools were pursuing. And we were able to report to the district the results of that survey. And when we report, we are very, very careful to make sure that we do not report in any way that is not by groupings. No individual will ever have their responses represented in any kind of reporting to this commission. It will be strictly by groupings of respondents. And we have a unique 4-digit number that will be provided to every respondent that makes sure that we will not have more than one stacking the ballot box, so to speak, by entering more than one response. But we will not include any, require any emails or names from your employees, as we have done in several online surveys. And our work, you may have seen our work in the Detroit Free Press. Also, we have 3 television stations that cover election survey research, including the WJRT TV12 in Flint, WLNS TV6 in Lansing, and Wood TV 8 in Grand Rapids. And that covers pretty much a large majority of the state when we conduct our election surveys. And we also do surveys for transit systems, for hospitals, you name it, and we've done surveys for them. And that includes a lot of online surveys like the one we're going to be conducting for you for a great number of school districts, where we will survey the parents to find out if in fact they're satisfied with the school district, whether or not they intend to keep their kids in their schools, and if they are not, what the reason is for why they may choose another school district. That is especially important given the schools of choice that most school districts use throughout Michigan. And we will be doing the same thing for your employees, reporting on their opinions on a fairly lengthy survey that we will be conducting, as I understand it from Kelly, probably launching it in mid-May with the idea of having it available for employees to respond to through the end of May. And then we'll report on those results. And I think that covers the process. We will be putting out reminders to participate. And again, the anonymity of all respondents is guaranteed. And over the many years we've been conducting surveys, we have indeed had folks who requested to know who are the individuals, the employees or whoever who gave us bad ratings, and we have steadfastly refused to ever reveal that to people that we are conducting surveys for. Not only is that inappropriate, but that's against all of the standards of survey research. And so that is something that is absolutely guaranteed, the anonymity of all of your employees in giving their absolute truthful responses to the survey questions that we will be asking. And I understand that Kelly will be working with you some more to finalize that survey questionnaire. And one other thing, Mr. Mayor, I noted in your email, you asked about former employees, I believe, whether or not they could participate. And I mentioned that we have done surveys for parents, and we have also done surveys for parents who have left school districts and brought their kids to other schools to ask them why they left. And so I would think that there is probably a way that we could do that. It may require asking a separate survey in terms of asking former employees why they left or how they would respond to the questions that are advanced in this online survey. And with that, I would be more than happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. So thank you, Bernie, for presenting this evening and taking our questions. Clarifying on the responses for, thank you for answering that question that I had presented about responding or surveying former employees. That several commissioners had brought that it's a question to me, and I was interested in getting some additional feedback as far as your thoughts on the efficacy of it and like impact on past surveys you may have conducted, if it was worthwhile or not. And in your experience, that topic worthwhile at all?
It can be useful. However, I think in amongst school districts, the leading reason for leaving in a lot of particular pockets of areas throughout the state, more often than not, is because the parents wanted to send their kids to private schools for either a Catholic education or private religious education. That is usually about half the time the reasons, and a lot will depend on how many employees you have that would be interviewed. that are past employees. If you have a large number of them, it can be useful to find out what are some of the reasons that they may have left, but also how they would rank or rate the city of Mount Pleasant, and some of the questions that your current employees will be asked to answer. So it can be useful, but a lot is going to depend on how many folks there are out there to interview.
Okay. Well, thank you for commenting on that. As far as the actual whether or not we include seek out former employees, that'd be a decision for the commission to decide. I know we were comfortable surveying current employees, but that'll be something we need to decide as a commission there. So I appreciate your feedback on that. At this time, though, I want to open it up to commissioners to ask questions and any information that they'd like to get additional feedback from Epic MRA. So either questions that they'd like explored further or feedback that they'd like.
Kelly is still our contact.
Yes, Kelly Sullivan is our primary contact. He had a different contract that he had to fulfill this evening. So again, it sounded like he was in Grosse Pointe, but any questions from other members of the commission? Yes, Vice Mayor Eke.
Good evening. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate your response regarding surveying former employees. That is, if we do that, and I appreciate separating them, because I do think that including them, their responses in the current survey might just simply skew things, sort of, complicate the situation. What I'm interested in, we talked about, the mayor and I talked, had a conversation with Kelly, and we're talking in terms of the time frame. Do you have any sense of what your time frame might be, in completing this particular survey?
As I understand it, the plan is to launch it and send out invitations to participate in mid-May, with the idea of ending it at the end of May. And when that is finished and we have all the responses in, well, then Kelly's going to need a few days to code the responses. There does appear to be a good number of open-ended questions where people would say why they responded the way they did. And so that will need some coding for a few days. And then once that's done, Neil, who is our administrator of our database and does all of the crosstabs and computer analysis, he will put together the top line responses to all the questions. And then a day or so later, we would have all of the crosstabs themselves, whereas it would be broken down by any of the demographics that are included in that survey, whether it be age, income, how long have people been employed, intent to continue employment, or anything along those lines. We would be able to cross-tab those results so that you'd have that. And then if, in fact, you were to conduct a survey among former employees, we would be able to separate that out so that you can see the responses of current as well as former employees. And again, I would hope that you would determine how many you may have in terms of former employees that may be able to be reached, because if it's only a few, it may not be worth doing. So if it's a lot, well, then it may be worth so.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. In our conversation with Kelly, actually, we talked about, the nature of the survey. I'm assuming that you'll have a quantitative survey, because I'm hearing you talk about coding and, all of that, but then there will be a qualitative, aspect of the survey. So is there a possibility of somebody at your end analyzing the qualitative, section, telling us what you're seeing, maybe sort of, in other words, interpreting that qualitative section where people say certain things?
Oh, absolutely. And quite often you will see contradictory results in multiple questions, and it is useful to have an interpretation of what that means. And we will do our best to interpret the results so that you know what the top issues are among employees and how they may have contradictory opinions about some issues. And that is quite often the case. However, usually there is a position that stands out above and beyond others, and we can try to interpret that. And we always do that in terms of analyzing survey results and indicating not only what the top line results are, but how there is a difference of opinions on a number of different issues, and also making recommendations as to how to use the data.
Excellent, thank you.
Commissioner Perschbacher.
I noticed on, I had asked for the mayor to send draft 1 as well, because he had only sent draft 2, so there was nothing to compare. I did notice that one of the added questions was, how would you rate the overall direction of the city? And I'm wondering, what was the thought process in adding that?
Well, that's something that whether you're talking about the federal government, the national government, the state government, the local government, or school district, it is always important. And you will hear regularly national polling groups say that X percent, 70%, I think, before the last general election, said that the country was off in the wrong direction. And when you look at the opinions of those who say where the country is in the right direction, or the city of Mount Pleasant is headed in the right direction, or is off on the wrong track, there's usually some similarities that you can see in the demographic composition of those folks who think the city is headed in the right direction, as opposed to those who think that the city is headed off on the wrong track. And I assume that's the wording of the question, and that can be very important. And that is generally a framework of how people may feel about not only the job that is being done on a number of different fronts, but also whether or not they just think that things are headed in the right direction for the city of Mount Pleasant. And quite often you will have opinion about the direction of local governments that are much, much more positive than what you have in terms of opinions about the direction of the state or the direction of the country. And right now, opinion continues to suggest that people think the country's off on the wrong direction. They think the state, in our statewide surveys, are slightly headed in the right direction. And quite often in a lot of local governments, you'll have people saying they're headed in the right direction. And if you see that they think that's off on the wrong track, that's something to try and find out what is the reason for that opinion. My guess is people are going to say it's headed in the right direction, but if it's not, or if it's mixed, other questions and responses will help us determine why they may feel that way.
Okay. I'd also like to point out that question 36 and question 40 on draft 2 are the same.
Well, I'm sure that Kelly will review that copiously and pull out any duplicates. And he also mentioned to me that the survey is still kind of long, and some decisions need to be made in terms of trying to shorten it up if at all possible.
Yes, we went from 51 questions to 59 from draft 1 to draft 2. So I think that it is quite long.
Well, and you don't want people to have to spend too much time answering the questions, and maybe peeling back on the number of responses where people have to say why they decided in a negative way the way they did. Maybe not asking as many of those open-ended questions, because that will be time-consuming for the participants.
Mhm.
Yes, I have found that surveys over 30 questions are usually not completed. So
Well,
I think that there's definitely needs to be some trimmed here.
We've had surveys in the 50 range by telephone and online. But when you get to that length, why you need to try and make sure that it's interesting and it's something that people are likely to respond to.
Yes.
Was there any other questions for yourself, Commissioner Birschbacher?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Alsaker, any
I'm set.
questions? Commissioner Zhang?
No questions, just a comment, but I think it is important, at least to me, it's real important that we consider the former employees, at least the last 32, 33 of them. And it's good that he can separate them so we can apply appropriate rate if we don't like their answers. But I think it's important that we listen to them.
Thank you, Commissioner Zhang.
I will be sure and mention to Kelly that that was something that the commission and the mayor were interested in.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't count the whole commission on that yet.
Yep, so,
We have to have that
yeah,
conversation.
discussion on that, that'll be a conversation the commission will have to have, because again, does seem like there is some differences in opinion on that aspect of the survey, so we can deliberate upon that as a commission. Getting feedback from the professionals is appreciated, though, on how that would take place, if that's something we did pursue, and again, thoughts on like the efficacy of it. Commissioner Eke, final thought?
You know what, I want to say thank you for this presentation. I do believe that this is an initial presentation to share with us what you have done. And this is not the final document. I'm going to ask you hypothetically, if you were anticipating any challenges, what might that look like? What might pose a challenge for you besides the length of the survey?
Well, an awful lot is going to depend on the opinions of your workers, and if they are having difficulties in dealing with their supervisors or anything like that. If those kinds of things come out, we don't know that yet, unless you have done surveys, a few years ago, and you know what the results of those are. The unknown at this point is something that needs to be evaluated, and I think that's why you do your surveys among your employees, to see if they are happy with their employment, happy with the way their work is going in terms of their interaction with their supervisors, and a variety of other things that I think this survey will end up testing. And it may well be that everyone is thinking that things are hunky-dory with their job and all is well. If not, well, then we should be able to try and tell from those responses where there may be difficulties in terms of your workforce opinions.
Okay, thank you.
You're very, very welcome.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here this evening, Bernie.
Thank you, and I shall leave your meeting now. Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Okay. That takes us to the end of proclamations and presentations. Moving on to additions and deletions to the agenda. Are there any from members of the commission? Any recommendations? No. In that case, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
I'll second.
No, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, at this time, we'll move on to public input on agenda items. If you have any public input to give on items that are on the agenda, please step forward to the podium. You'll be given 5 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to give public input on the agenda items? Oh, thank you, Jason. Well, yeah, starting with the audience.
Hi, my name is Malcolm Fox. Address 4829 Lewis Drive, 48858. Can I have like a minute or something?
You have 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay.
Yes.
I'd like to just reaffirm my support for the updates on the master plan for the Parks and Rec Department primarily. It's also good to hear that the water treatment plant is going to be updated soon. I think that's, from my point of view, a good idea. Because I'm older and I remember a long time ago when it first started, so it's time. But anyway, back to the subject at hand. And I'd like to just to reaffirm the idea of the Indian Pines mountain bike trail. We are happy to offer support. I'm with the Central Michigan Mountain Bike Association. It's a 5-county subgroup of the International Mountain Bike Association. We are doing projects in a lot of towns. We're just finishing up one with the city of Midland. It's a couple $100,000 project. We raised the money in about a year, and we're putting in a big update to the Midland City Forest. I'd also like to offer some ideas to update the initial master plan ideas for the park. Maybe some cost savings, the way to get things done more quickly and with fewer funds required from the city. So I'd like to share that whenever you're ready in the future. I looked through the update. I didn't see a time frame for anything. So I suppose that's open-ended, but I'd just like to maybe just put a push for that. And also, I'd also like to offer an idea, just to throw it out there, that would complement that project. And there are a lot of people, dozens and dozens and dozens, who didn't show up because they're busy doing stuff, and who support this project and who would use it a lot. And they like the idea. It's a great idea, but they also said that they also hope for a place that they could have their kids go locally, just ride their bike to a natural surface trail. So I'm not talking about paved trails that are very expensive to build and maintain over time. I'm talking about natural surface trails. Fun where you're multi-use trails for runners, walkers, mountain bikers, just people want to get out, enjoy some fresh air, have a little fun. And we can do that right here in town. I know that it's tied up right now, but I remember the Parks and Rec Commission meeting where the great idea was to block off some of that space in the Mount Pleasant Center for recreation. And I remember seeing the map, and I remember Commissioner Little talked about that, and it was a done deal. And I'd like to raise the idea, just think about that, is to move ahead with that regardless of the outcome of the rest of the project, because there's going to be housing or whatever, but that recreational core exists in the plan now, and utilize that part of the plan now, of that property. And we could do that relatively quickly and very efficiently cost-wise, because these are not paved trails, they're natural surface trails. And if you've traveled around the country, I just got back from a few weeks out west in different places, and that's a natural thing out there. And it brings in a lot of business, and it brings in a lot of people who want to live there. So anyway, just a plug for that. I'd be happy to share thoughts on that someday if needed or necessary, or if it'd be helpful or hopeful. But anyway, I'd just like to reaffirm my support and our association support for the project in the master plan, and offer some ideas for parallel projects more rapidly too. Anyway, thank you and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience? Yeah, please step forward.
Hello, my name is Mike Ring. I own Motorless Motion downtown. And I'm speaking just in support of what Malcolm just talked about. And I talk to people daily about wondering what to do in downtown, what to do in the city, either traveling or citizens. The mountain bike trail would be a pretty great thing. I've seen it work in several communities throughout Michigan, where it just brings in tons of business. So I just wanted to voice my support for the project, and hopefully we can get moving on that at some point. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Other members of the audience? I believe there was someone on Zoom. Hi, Joseph. I believe you have the mic.
Hello, my name is Joseph Carrion. I live on 109 North Arnold Street. I'd just like to talk about also my approval for the changes of the 2050 master plan. But I do want to talk in depth for book 3, page 21 in particular. Again, this particular image was left off of the packet, but Manuela and Phil have done a good job still bringing up these changes in the planning meeting and the Parks and Rec meeting. But it has to do with the bridge being built, the vehicle bridge being built that connects Town Hall to Island Park. And at first I wasn't in approval of it, but after hearing the necessity that we really only have one way in and out of Island Park, and if anything were to go wrong, we're in a position where we're kind of screwed. I'm in full agreement that this project is what we need, and I hope that it stays within the drawing of that page, which doesn't give a direct path from Broadway straight into Island Park. Currently in the image, it shows that there's a curvature that hopefully keeps traffic at a minimum speed level, which I hope is the plan. Also, I want to speak about the same image regarding Town Center. I'm not sure if this is true, but I currently see 4 entrances to the Island Park, or I'm sorry, to the Town Center parking lot, as opposed to the 3 that I was aware of. And this is coming from an event planner perspective. I don't know if it's there now, but there seems to be an entrance to the north of the parking lot that connects to businesses to the north. I don't know if that's currently in effect or if that's going to be a future planning thing. I hope that could be discussed today. But I also hope if the true nature of this vehicle bridge is to bring more connections to Island Park, I hope that we can also in the future somehow plan to add in a new pedestrian bridge that connects the town center parking lot to Island Park directly. This would not only increase the parking to Island Park if we're, because I understand that we want to have bigger events. So this would naturally increase the parking without having to create actual parking in Island Park. But this will also give Island Park access to the newly built public bathrooms. And I just think that is a great addition to building a true connection between Island Park and our downtown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Joseph. Is there anyone else on Zoom? Gotcha. Any emails? Okay. At this time, I'll close public input on agenda items. And we'll move into receipt of petitions and communications. Manager dissents? No, not really.
Is it on?
Jack, my best, that works for everyone.
Might work on TV.
Communications this evening includes first quarter investment report minutes of the planning commission for March 2025. Email from Jimmy Pearson regarding parking concerns at Fuller and Ganyard schools. Notice of temporary traffic control order number 2, 2025. Notice of temporary traffic control order number 3, 2025. And notice of temporary traffic control order number 4, 2025.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Next, we will move on to the consent items.
I think we have it working now. Perfect. All right. Consent items this evening includes approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held April 14, 2025, approval of minutes from the closed session held April 14, 2025, consider investing $2 million of the cash and cash equivalent funds from the Huntington account into the investments held by Meter, consider appointment of City Treasurer Melissa Garcia, consider approval of the sole source purchase for 4 fire hydrants from East Jordan Company for $28,516, and consider approval of payrolls and warrants.
Thank you. Are there any items that the commission would like removed from the consent agenda and into the regular agenda? Seeing none, I take a motion to approve the consent items as presented.
So approved. So, so moved.
So moved.
Yeah.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the consent items, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
We've approved this, but after we see that $2 million moved to investments, can we get something that'll say where those investments?
Yeah. To clarify, yep, the motion was
Where they-
approved, but yep, if we could.
So we can see where they went.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's see, at this time, we have no public hearings, so we'll move on to new business. First item is a resolution to purchase, acquire, and construct improvements to the water supply system and to publish notice of intent to issue revenue bonds. Manager DeSense, if you will.
I can tee this up. So the city submitted an application for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, the DWSRF program, for upgrades at the water treatment plant 2023. These upgrades include the replacement of various water plant components, distribution system work on the city's water source wells, and additional capacity for raw water storage. The project has been broken into 2 phases, with the first phase being an anticipated $10.48 million. The city's application for this first phase was approved by the state last year, and the DWSRF program has pledged $2.6 million in principal forgiveness for the city. At the April 14, 2025 meeting, the City Commission approved contracts for Dickinson Wright to provide bond counsel. Bond counsel is now recommending that the city intend to issue revenue bonds not to exceed $18 million under the authority of Michigan's Act 94. The $18 million allows for a good gap between anticipated costs and what the final bids may come in at. Please note that these numbers, all of these numbers that I've discussed, for those commissioners that have been on for the past few years, you see these things change. The City Commission was presented with an anticipated cost for the WRF project, both phase 1, phase 2. Those numbers change over time. Ultimately, everything comes back to the City Commission for final consideration. So before any money is spent, any bonds are issued or anything like that, the final project does come back to the City Commission for final approval. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. The City Commission tonight, though, is asked to approve the attached resolution, which would authorize the notice of intent to issue revenue bonds. We're joined this evening by the Director of Finance, Lauren Pavlowski, as well as Roger Sweats of Dickinson Wright, if the City Commission has any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions or discussion that the members of the commission would like to have on this item? I've seen Commissioner Zhang jump at the chance, so I will start with him. Commissioner Zhang.
This is $18 million. It allows for this generous gap between anticipated costs and what the final bids come in at. Will these additional, will this result in additional fees and interest because we're asking for 18 instead of 10?
Okay, I'll have Roger answer that question.
No, not unless in the end you would actually need to use that 18 million. At this point, you're just approving an upward number to leave room just in case bids come in unexpectedly high. If they would come in at 18 million and you would decide to borrow 18 million, that would increase some of the fees. But at this point, this this has no impact other than to open the door to give you more options if bids come in high. You have no obligation to do so, and just opening the door does not have any cost.
Any additional questions while you have the floor?
When we outlined the justification for this thing, part of that justification was to, so that we could repair the lead and the galvanized lines. When this is finished, will that be the end of the known lead and galvanized?
Based on current estimates, this would take care of all the galvanized services that are currently in the system that we can't guarantee were never connected to lead in the past. So, yes.
Any additional questions, Commissioner Zhang, at this time? Other commissioners? Commissioner Perschbacher?
Because this is something that we have been working on for a while, I support this, as this does give us an opening or another avenue if we should need it. I think that our water system is very important to the city, and I think that it is something that we must maintain.
Just clarity.
Commissioner Ake or Vice Mayor Ake?
Still Commissioner Ake. All right, I just want to clarify, the difference in the amount that was proposed earlier and the new amount is simply to enable us if the cost goes up. It just provides us with wiggle room, just in case the cost goes up, right? That's what I'm hearing.
Correct. Wiggle room is the exact right concept.
Okay.
So just one thing to maybe help you a little bit with that. Part of your financing includes about $10 million of regular loan, and then there's $2 million plus of what they call principal forgiveness, and then there's $333,000 that is called grant. So even though you're going to have some significant principal forgiveness, that does have to be included in the initial bond issue. So we're looking at, with approved amounts, the need to be able to bond $12,767,000. So the difference between that and the 18 million is the wiggle room. And the only reason is, in recent years with the COVID situation, we had a lot of unexpected inflation in bids. And now, of course, we've got different challenges today. So this just gives you wiggle room. When the bids come in, you will get the exact number that needs to be borrowed. The state has very strict rules about that, so you cannot borrow any more than what the bids will dictate. You'll get the bids. The state requires a 5% contingency, and that will be the number. That whole package will come back to you, and the city commission will need to award the bids at that amount that they come in. If that amount comes in way high and that's not acceptable to you, you will have the option to say no at that point. If there are ways to reduce the project and get it back within a number you find acceptable, you will have that option. Or if you believe it's important enough to do the whole thing, and there's the availability to get more financing, this 18 million gives you that option. Those are decisions that are totally in the hands of the city commission, and those bids come in, I believe, on June 23, late June. And I believe the milestone calls for you to do a tentative award of bids on July 15. So that will all come back to you in that time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Last question.
Commissioner Alsager, if she has any thoughts or questions and everything at this time.
No, I appreciate the explanation.
Yeah, Commissioner Zhang, and then after that, I'd probably entertain a motion. But yeah, Commissioner Zhang, if you have questions.
The repayment of these bonds are going to be from water users and not from taxes, right?
Correct. These will be from revenues of the system.
Thank you. Okay. At this time, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I move that we approve the attached resolution authorizing the notice of intent to issue revenue bonds.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Gotcha. There is a motion and a second. Yes, as has been pointed out, this work has been a long time coming. It's something that I know I've been hearing about since I've started on the commission, and it's critical infrastructure that we're dealing with. And I am very excited to approve that. Is there any other final comments before I call the vote? No. All those in favor of approving the resolution as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Okay. That's going to bring us to item 20, presentation on the 2050 master plan updates by Director of Planning and Community Development, Director Manuela Powedeco.
All right, so I'm just gonna tee this up, but the presentation is gonna be done by Jason Ball. He's the senior planner from Progressive Companies, the consulting firm who has been working on the Mission Street Improvement Plan and the master plan update. So we have completed the draft that we're gonna be presenting to you today. On your packet, we did submit a memo and then a list of itemized items that were updated in the master plans. And you can also find, and the public is able to find the two documents, the existing master plan and all the books with the updates on the city's website if you're curious and want to check it out. So the requested action for tonight will be for the city commission to, obviously you can ask questions, and then if you're ready to approve the proposed 2050 master plan update to be released for a 63-day review period and comment period. Subject to Michigan Planning Enabling Act. During that 63 review period, there are going to be other entities, they're going to be reviewing the plan, and the city commission can also ask staff to come back if there are any updates that need to be made. So hopefully that explains why we're here today, and I'm going to have Jason start, and Phil and I can jump in when needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manuela. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Jason Ball. I'm a consultant with Progressive Companies. So I believe you all are in possession of a memo from myself as well as Manuela kind of outlining the major changes to the master plan. In this case, this is a very targeted master plan update. It was driven by the work on the Mission Street Improvement Plan, as well as sort of the opportunity that since the plan was open to make some other updates that reflected changes since the plan was adopted in 2020. There were several projects that were identified or goals and objectives that there's been progress on. So some things got done. And so the plan needed to reflect those. And then the update to the 5-year Parks and Recreation Plan that Phil can speak to more. So the presentation I'll walk through tonight is the same presentation that was given to the Planning Commission on April 3rd, where they made a motion to recommend the plan to you all. Again, as Manuela mentioned, your opportunity for taking action tonight is to approve the plan for being released for formal public comment. That triggers a 63-day review period per state legislation, at which time the plan will go back to Planning Commission for a public hearing and ultimately back to you all for final approval. So just really briefly, these are the things we'll cover tonight, just that overall process. We'll give a quick summary of updates to the plan, and then we'll have time for discussion. I'm happy to answer questions at any point in time during the presentation.
Thank you.
Generally speaking, hopefully some of you were able to participate in or were aware of the overall Mission Street Improvement Plan process. We're just over a year now from when that started, so last March. So over that period of time, we established a steering committee that was made up of representatives from the DDA, the Planning Commission, local stakeholders, business owners along Mission Street. That steering committee met 4 times throughout the process. We conducted 2 different community surveys. Hopefully you all had an opportunity to weigh in on those. And then the overall plan came back to the steering committee for final approval in December, at which point in time the plan went to the DDA. The DDA approved the plan, and that plan was presented to the Planning Commission. The plan itself is the image on the right-hand side of this screen. That plan was just a document, though, that said, here is this work we did to really sort of dig in deep on Mission Street, with the understanding, the clear direction from staff and the city manager that our most important thing with this work was to be sure that anything we recommended was feasible. So in the past, there's been recommendations for Mission Street over time that couldn't fit within the existing right-of-way, the space that's publicly owned, and those created lots of challenges. And so the number one goal for this was to be sure that anything we did was indeed feasible. Again, just to center us all in the overall status of the update, we are at number 4 on this list tonight. So this is the determination for submitting the plan for review or sending it back to Planning Commission for additional work. And then you can see those additional steps as outlined here. At the same time that we're walking through this master plan update, it's also going through the Parks and Recreation Commission because the master plan holds their plan within it as a book. Before I move on, any questions just on process? Does that overall process make sense to everyone?
Why 63 days? Where's that extra 3 days come from? Do you know?
I do not know the answer to that.
That's fair.
I actually, no, never mind. It's a number of weeks.
Oh, okay.
So 63 is divisible by 7. So that's why it's a number of weeks. I'm guessing, I don't know,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna guess. Planners work in weeks for public notice usually. So I'll then walk through just some high points of plan updates. Again, in your packet, there's a memo that details those very specifically. We'll just walk through some high points. The master plan itself is broken into a series of books, which are essentially operate like chapters, but they're all their individual document. The first book is just an executive summary. So there are updates listed here to that book. The acknowledgement page obviously changed for all the books, staff changed, elected officials, appointed officials changed. And then changes were made to this book to reflect changes throughout the rest of the plan. So goals and objectives that changed in book 5 are reflected in book 0. We also added new text just summarizing this overall update process to this executive summary portion of the plan. Book number 1 then is where we have some substantive changes. So master plans at their core define a vision for land use and for the future. So in this case, the plan defines a vision for land use for 2050 in Mount Pleasant. And so with the update for the work on Mission Street, one of the most substantive things we've done is we've created a new future land use classification for Southern Mission Street. So today, Mission Street south of Preston has the same future land use classification as downtown. Those are 2 really different places. And so the vision from the current plan was that eventually that portion of Mission Street would become like downtown by 2050. I think what we heard really clearly from our steering committee, from work with others, is while we want to see changes to Mission Street, like it being more pedestrian friendly, looking at ways for it to feel not quite so chaotic and dangerous, there's not an intent that it duplicates downtown. And so there's a new future land use classification that does that kind of provides a happy medium that allows for redevelopment, reinvestment in Mission Street, but not driving it to feel like a downtown context, because that's probably not in the cards between now and 2050, which is only 25 years from now, which is kind of crazy to say. In addition to that, in this section, there are some recommended improvements or updates to the zoning ordinance, and those follow through with that same recommendation on allowing for more flexibility around Mission Street. So this is the current future land use map. The change in the current plan future land use map is that area in the black circle there. So Southern Mission Street, we add this new classification for mixed use regional corridor. In the old plan, that wasn't a classification that existed. So that's the big change on future land use map. Future land use in a master plan has 2 components. There's a map that says where it is, and then there's a description for what that thing is. And so in this case, that regional corridor, we talked about where it applies to. Big emphasis on access management. So in other words, limiting the number of driveways, the number of turns that cars have to make, because every turn is a potential crash. And so the fewer turns cars have to make, the safer that gets. Also looking at ways to allow buildings to be set back further from the street. Today, there's a requirement for new buildings to be set very close to the street. That makes for some really challenging practical issues, like how do you deal with drive-through restaurants? And so allowing for some setbacks, still not encouraging parking to be in front of those buildings, but allowing for a drive aisle, a little more separation between the building and the street for public space and landscaping. And then also encouraging the use of parking behind the face of the building versus all the way behind the building. There are some other changes here too. Generally speaking, again, we're sort of laying the groundwork in the master plan for changes to the zoning ordinance that could follow on. So you may decide that these are great changes to do tomorrow. You may decide that they're great changes to do 5 or 10 years in the future, but the master plan sort of gives you that guidance and to move toward those changes as you see fit over the life of the plan. So these are those current pages and some of the updates, right? So the current plan, we have a piece on implementing the CD4 district. So that's the area on northern Mission Street. And so in the new plan, we're recommending providing more flexibility in that area and also allowing for additional uses and more flexible options for redevelopment. One of those things is a simple thing that sounds small, but actually is a big deal, is today your zoning code in your plan restricts a property to one principal building, one principal use, or one principal building. So if you have a lot, you can only have one building on it that does your principal use. If you have a large lot that presents opportunities for redevelopment, that makes redevelopment hard. You either have to split your lot or you have to add on to an existing building. So by doing small things like allowing multiple buildings per use, you give more flexibility, more opportunities for reinvestment, redevelopment in the corridor that isn't just really big changes, but smaller incremental changes over time. And that's the graphic at the bottom of this page showing opportunities for sort of small incremental change versus one big change all at once. And the second book deals with transportation from sort of a citywide perspective. So there are several sections that were updated to reflect the Mission Street Improvement Plan. And then we just moved the location of the access management plan so it wasn't the last thing in the book, because access management is really important. We want to be sure we didn't communicate that it was the least important thing in the book. This is the current future transportation plan. A couple of big changes to this plan that you'll see in the update. One is that all the little blue circles there indicate proposed roundabouts to Mission Street. In the new plan, we're only recommending, excuse me, one roundabout, and that is at Bluegrass, the extreme southern end of the corridor. There are a bunch of reasons for that. One of those is that issue around feasibility. There's just not enough room to fit all those roundabouts in within the existing right of way. Also, generally speaking, Mission Street's seen a decline in traffic over the last 20 years. And so those roundabouts are great at moving lots of traffic, but they aren't necessarily great at helping pedestrians cross. And so because there's constant flow of traffic. And so rather than recommending roundabouts, you'll see here we're recommending enhanced non-motorized crossings. So in other words, better opportunities for pedestrians, bicyclists, folks to cross the street, but not recommending large infrastructure improvements like roundabouts. We also reduced the number of street typologies. In the old plan, you'll see a note for several different types of thoroughfares and avenues. So we went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of streets down to 4. So connectors, which are your neighborhood streets, multimodal thoroughfares, which are Mission Street and Pickard, multimodal avenues, which is the area through downtown and connections, and then we're showing a proposed reroute of M20 around downtown. Another significant change is that the current plan recognizes an opportunity to add an on-ramp at Broomfield and 127. That section of the plan also identifies a goal of reducing traffic on Mission Street. We heard very loud and clear from our steering committee and the folks we worked with that we didn't want to see further declines of traffic on Mission Street. What we wanted to do was make Mission Street, thank you so much. It's seasonal allergies. We wanted to make Mission Street a friendlier place to be able to drive and walk on so that it can actually have more traffic, but move traffic more efficiently and effectively. And so that's the reflected in this change. So rather than recommending an on-ramp at Broomfield, if there's big change that happens to 127, it's to allow the intersection at Business 127 at the southern end of town to go both ways. Today, as you know, you can only get on going one way. And so that would allow folks to not have to drive the entire length of Mission Street if they wanted to go north on 127 if you're already at the southern end. In addition, there's a big change to the non-motorized element of the plan. This is the non-motorized network element of the plan today. The little map there at the top is from the 2012 non-motorized plan that was done jointly between the city and the township. That's still in the plan. But as part of the Mission Street Improvement Plan, we adopted this non-motorized framework that not just helps get people through Mission Street, but also across it, right? Because Mission bisects your community. There are lots of important destinations east and west. And so you'll see here one of the major recommendations is the addition of a shared use path on the southern end of Mission Street. So a pathway that can host both bikes and walkers off of the road because we have enough space on that portion of Mission Street to do that. On the northern portion, shifting bicyclists to Kinney Avenue. Kinney is a really great boulevard street. It's got lots of space. It's a wonderful place to ride a bike. So if you're trying to get north and south on Mission Street, rather than trying to cram bikes on Mission where we don't have really enough room to do it well, encouraging bicyclists to use that parallel route that also connects really well into East Campus Drive through CMU and then down to Mission Street. You'll also note here the same identification of those enhanced non-motorized crossings. So looking at key places to get across Mission Street between things like downtown, Island Park, the hospital, housing development, so that we're really thinking about not just Mission Street north and south, but how to get folks across. I'll pause there. Any questions from anybody at this point in time?
Question for you. I believe going back to the beginning when we were talking about in the southern portion of Mission Street, closeness of buildings to the road, and that distance there. A lot like I think longstanding just like philosophy talk on that is move buildings closer to the road slows down traffic because of the sense of closeness. Could you just talk about that? It's a bit of a change and everything, so it's just like updating like that understanding there and everything.
So that philosophy is still true, right? So generally speaking, folks drive slower if there's an element of perceived like vertical conflict, right? So I'm driving through a place, if it's wide open, I can see forever, I'll drive really fast. If it's not, I'm going to slow down because I can't see forever. So our recommendation is not to move buildings 100 feet back from the road, but to allow some reasonable setback distance there between 10 and 20 feet typically. And what that does is it allows for a drive lane in front of the building. So if I need to get a drive-through restaurant that you have a lot of, for example, can get away with one driveway because now people can drive around the front of the building after they do their drive-through and get out onto Mission Street. With the current requirement, the buildings have to be at the lot line. You have to have 2 driveways for every drive-through, right? Because I have to drive in, around the building, and drive out. Allowing that space in front of the building also allows for some setback distance because the reality is the other thing we heard was that there was no desire to reduce the number of lanes on Mission Street. It was going to be a 5-lane road. And so with that understanding, moving buildings close to that 5-lane road isn't really the context that you typically have buildings set at sidewalk, right? Your places like downtown with slower streets that are good for pedestrians to walk on. Mission Street isn't that road, and there isn't really a vision for Mission Street to be like what you Broadway anytime soon. And so that's kind of recognition of that reality, not that we want to set buildings 100 feet back from the road with a giant, parking lot that creates lots of stormwater runoff like we used to, but sort of finding a happy medium and balance in there.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Zhang?
Just one question. In that discussion, you indicated that there's a couple of things. The traffic counts on Mission were declining, and there was a recommendation not to reduce the traffic on Mission, yet we're showing 127 being moved to Isabella. Is there some conflict in those statements?
127 being moved to Isabella, I'm sorry.
The on-ramp, is that what you're talking about?
Is the on-ramp is going to just leave Mission the way it is?
Correct. So on this slide, on the left-hand side is the page from the current plan. So the current plan recommends creating an on-ramp at Broomfield. And so what we're recommending is shifting that on-ramp to the south because there's already a ramp there. And that way we're not taking traffic off of Mission Street.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other commissioner?
I just have a comment. I live by the high school,
Mm-hmm.
and just the other day I got on Bellows Street and I wanted to connect with the pathway that takes you down to Shepherd. So I'm on Bellows, and then you can see that bike pathway stops. But anyhow, you still keep going on the road and you just slow down and pay attention.
Yeah. And so I think we're showing kind of continuation in many of those bike pathways just by signage or other options, again, to try to be sure people can get to and across Mission Street. Because some of those places have intersections that we're identifying here, a couple of them don't. And so looking at ways to provide for those. So book 3 then deals with focused redevelopment opportunities. And so in this case, there's a large section in this book that deals with Mission Street today. That section has been removed and it's been replaced with the summary document from the Mission Street Improvement Plan. And so that's based on the information that we gathered during that work, and that's reflected now in the book. I'll talk about that briefly, and then staff can speak to updates to the Town Center Vision Plan and the Town and Gown section that reflect changes to projects and work that's been completed recently here in the city. Some small updates. This is the pedestrian shed map and the current plan. That's the future land use map behind it. So we replaced it with the new future land use map. Not a huge change there, but just as you're flipping through, if you notice a change, that is there to reflect consistency. So on the left-hand side of this slide is the current Mission Street concept plan. It shows a lot of change and really significant change over a relatively short period of time. On the right-hand side is the sort of change that we're recommending and thinking about. Again, sort of more balanced approaches to improve the experience and safety on Mission Street, but not looking at large whole-scale redevelopment that doesn't necessarily reflect existing land ownership, building types, or the road right-of-way realities. The current plan recommends a cross-section for Mission Street that just doesn't fit in most of the right-of-way, including on-street parking that MDOT, the owner of the road, has real concern with, but there just isn't space to fit on-street parking with a 5-lane road where you have it there today. There shouldn't be a lot of news in that section because it is just implementing the Mission Street Improvement Plan, but happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Yeah, just to know, on the right side, it's Corporate Drive to Preston Street. So that's, again, the northern portion of the road. So that's where that median and everything. On the southern side, you're talking about the 5 lanes, but the northern side, it's decreasing it down to 4 lanes with the median and everything.
So we're not actually decreasing down to 4 lanes any either. Median's just taking the recommendation. And so again, in the plan itself, there's a series of opportunities to solve sort of challenges on Mission Street, right? Clearing away the #1 challenge or issue we heard on Mission Street was safety. What really wasn't close. That was the thing we heard most frequently, were concerns about safety. Short of reducing the number of lanes on Mission Street, going from 5 to 3, which is not something anybody was particularly interested in, adding a median is the most impactful way to improve safety. Because now, instead of being able to make a left turn anywhere, you have specific areas where you can make left turns. The actual mechanism to implement that median, right, our plan itself is sort of setting a vision and saying to MDOT, who owns the road, these are the kinds of improvements we want to see on Mission Street over time. But the detailed work of how that median actually fits, where the right turns are in that median, all has to be done at the point in time that MDOT decides to do a full road reconstruction. And so there's a whole set of additional sort of public engagement, work with property owners to be sure you've got the right turning radius to get into your driveway. And all of those things will have to happen once there's actually funding for that project. We're just sort of clearly setting a vision that, knowing that safety is a priority, addressing the median is something that's of interest. One of the things the plan is really strongly recommends too is not just waiting for the big project, right? So there are lots of little things that we can do over time that'll improve safety on the corridor. So combining driveways wherever we can, looking at pedestrian improvements, doing things to slow how people make left turns so they aren't cutting the corner really quickly. Little things like that are relatively affordable. And I think we've heard really positive feedback from MDOT on looking at incorporating some of those as they have resurfacing projects or other opportunities come up that sort of make sense to make some of those improvements.
Thank you.
So I can turn over to oh, I'm sorry. Any other questions about that for me?
Not seeing any.
All right, so very quickly, I'm going to cover some downtown changes. This is really to reflect some of the work that we have accomplished since the release of the master plan 5 years ago. So the big one is the town center project. Obviously, this has been on master plans for decades, so this has been a great accomplishment of the city of Mount Pleasant. This is what this is representing. So we're just putting that new image here of town center. And then for I don't have the image here. Yeah, I don't have the image on the slide, which you heard a public comment period. So I'm going to mention another one that's in the town center vision plan that relates to the pedestrian bridge that connects us here at City Hall and Broadway to Island Park. So there is a hand draw drawing that I made. It's on page 21 of book 3. And that drawing is representing Oak Street to continue all the way down. And then alongside of the pedestrian bridge for eventually for the city to build a road to a bridge, right? To take the vehicles to Island Park. The reason is because we only have one in and out entrance to the park, and it can be quite difficult to organize all of that when we have events, and maybe dangerous too in case we have an emergency. So that's a connection that we kept. And the reason for keeping a connection to Island Park in a different way was because it was one of the main public comments that we received 5 years ago, that we wanted to strengthen the connections between downtown and Island Park. And then the other one that we have proposed as an amendment, so you can see the current plan on the left and the proposed plan on the right, is to strengthen connections between downtown and Central Michigan University. That was another big component of public engagement 5 years ago. And at the intersection where you can see that circle today is where we have the yellow chair. So that's what we have in the image today in the proposed master plan update. So you can see the yellow chair. And then the other way to help strengthen that connection between downtown and CMU is to look at the other end. So when we go to the other end, you're going to see in this proposed plan image, it's an image of the old SBX store and the old mount shop on those corners. And the illustration is representing retrofit of the old malt shop with an additional story for housing after we spoke with the property owner. And the one on the left is showing a complete redevelopment based on City 5 zoning, which is what we have there today. So that's the downtown changes that we are proposing. Do you have any questions, I guess? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, could you repeat your comment about the old malt shop?
Yeah, so the malt shop building is represented on the right of the right image. We are basically showing 2 redevelopment scenarios on those 2 corners, because that's when basically if you get, from downtown to CMU, that's where you have that CMU sign at the end of it. So those 2 sites are really important for the city to see developed and active as it used to be in the past. So the image here shows an additional story on top of the malt shop, showing some housing units as an option for redeveloping it.
Okay. Was there any conversation about SBX?
So the SBX is a completely new building that I'm representing there. We don't have any plans. This is just a vision drawing to show what's possible. I did speak with the owner a few years ago. I've been trying to reach out to him, but it is a site. It's a very big site. We can accommodate a lot of units, and there has been interest in and out from developers across the years since I've joined. So I think by showcasing this drawing, and I can take other perspectives and marketing those sites, hopefully we can get someone to redevelop them and bring businesses on those 2 corners.
Cool. All right, thanks.
Yeah. On that topic, and this is a bit of clarification for myself, because I know, I believe it's the section with the SBX building has zoning that's different than the area around it. It's the CD5, I believe you mentioned. Does that extend into the malt shop area?
Does.
Okay, I wasn't certain if that would require rezoning or anything in the future. Okay, so that all is CD5 zoning there. Okay. Other question is a bit more of comments and everything for the bridge. Biggest, again, for myself and everything, biggest thing for that is that the pedestrian bridge that's currently there, it is a historical bridge. It has that historical element there. So it would be just concerns over replacing would be the biggest concern for myself. The other would just be wanting to address additional vehicle, like allowing additional vehicle traffic in Island Park. I would just want to talk about, make sure that in the future, if that was being put forward, there was conversations about the character of the park. Again, with restrictions on vehicle, it's a lot more pedestrian friendly, but putting in a bridge could open up for more through traffic through the area. That's the concern that's in my head and everything on it.
I see.
Not that it's not a project that's not worthwhile, and I think the concerns over safety are valid there, but it's just like, as I see that, as I approach that, those are the things that stand out to me. So I just wanted to
Absolutely.
communicate that more than anything.
Yeah, those are really great goals. So just in terms of the bridge, I did keep that pedestrian bridge, and the legend does say existing bridge. The idea in the plan, how it is represented today, is not to replace it or remove it. And I think the way we did the drawing, and again, this is just a visioning drawing, quick drawing to show what's possible. The idea would be to try to calm down traffic with different radiuses, and then traffic calming measures could be implemented for sure if we ever get to that point to build that. But yeah, I don't know if Phil wants to share any things on that, but definitely the goal to ensure that we're not doing through traffic on Island Park. I think that's a good one.
Gotcha. Yep, and I appreciate that. And again, this is a vision for the future, so it's not set in stone. It's something that guides us in our development. So, again, I appreciate that you taking that feedback there. Other commissioners with questions or comments at this point for Manuela? If not, you're free to continue.
Thank you. And I'm going to hand it over to Phil here just momentarily to walk through the Parks and Recreation updates. The last update to Book 3 is on the economic development strategy section. And there are just a couple of strategies that are outlined here in red that reflect updates to this portion of the plan. One is to reflect the change to Michigan Street and corridor study has been done. So there was a goal in the plan to actually do the study. So it's been completed and then to implement it. And then we'll talk a little more about changing demographics. We did sort of refresh of the demographics section of the plan and how those sort of new understanding of change in Mount Pleasant when it relates to sort of population and age demographics is reflected in some of the goals for the plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil, and I'm going to do my best, Phil, to open up
Book 4.
Book 4. For some reason, it's at the end of Book 4, sorry. For some reason, it started at the end. There you go.
Good evening. So this is going to be very quick and it's going to look like I'm flying through it, but there's very few changes. We really just updated numbers, pictures, and names and things like that. I will stop where we are making the most changes. So the acknowledgement page, and then we fly all the way down to budget numbers. So the budget numbers are changed just because the years changed, obviously. So we put in what was budgeted in 25 all the way back to 21. The previous one was 21 back to, was it 17 or 16, something like that. We updated the grants page, and the only update on the grants page is that we got the 2024 grant for the north segment of the GKB trail. And just so everybody knows, the grant history is only the DNR grants. And the reason why this is because we do this strictly for the DNR to be eligible for funding. So we follow their guidelines on what needs to be in there. And then if we go to the individual park pages, if you go through the old section, you'll notice that there's a difference just, I don't find one that actually has a box. So the box that's on the bottom left there, the action plan summary, so that just reflects what is in the plan for the next 5 years. It also reflects our CIP, which is one of the big changes that we made that I'll kind of go through here in a second. But so each park page, individual page was updated that way. And then we go down here to the bottom.
Can I stop and ask you about Indian Pines Park?
Yeah,
Is there a page for that one?
yeah.
I'd like to see that one.
That's it.
So the last point says, talks about the mountain biking.
Yeah, so we did that in the previous 5 years. We did the master plan. We brought it to the commission. It was just basically outlining what the master plan was going to look like. We did that with staff. There is nothing in the CIP to build that at this point. So it was more just actually putting the plan in place in the previous 5 years.
Thanks. Hard to see it go
That's
by.
enough to make us dizzy.
Yeah, I apologize.
Good luck looking for.
We will get there. Gotta catch up. So this is the major change. So previously, we put in all the projects that were brought up during the process, during the survey process and the outreach process. What we did in this one is we just put in there what was in the capital plan. So this reflects the capital plan for the next 5 years. And then the other thing we did was put what we accomplished over the previous 5 years, just so that is reflected as well. But basically, by having some of the different elements in the previous plan, there was some confusion that those things were going to be getting done. And we just didn't have that kind of funding to be able to just, it wasn't put to a number, essentially. So this is actually put to a number, and the expectation is that these projects will be completed. Obviously, we know how the CIP works. Some things get pushed. The two of the things got pushed just this year. The north section got pushed because we got the extra funding, and then the dam project got pushed to next year because we had to do some testing. Eagle required some testing, so and then we just updated this ADA transition plan. We took out the things that were completed, but we kept in what was still needed to be done. But other than that, that is all that was changed. In that plan.
Good thing you knew what you were looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Not seeing any. Thank you, Phil.
Yep.
Thanks.
So that takes us on to book number 5. Which is the final portion of the plan. This section identifies all of the goals and objectives. In your packet, in the memo, we detailed each goal and objective that changed. We added one objective to reflect the Mission Street Improvement Plan. We added another objective substantially to reflect that plan. Otherwise, as you look through your memo, you'll see that almost all the updates to objectives are to reflect a project that was completed, or to clarify a bit of language, or to reflect reality since the plan. Happy to walk through those if you'd like. We walked through each of them in detail with the Planning Commission, but I'm also happy to spare you that if needed, if the memo will suffice. The other significant update that I can talk through, and then we can determine whether or not you'd like to go through goals and objectives, is to the demographics section. Again, won't walk through all of this. But as part of the update, we did update the demographics work that was done back in 2018, 2019. Obviously, a big change in Mount Pleasant since that time that is reduced enrollment at Central Michigan University. And so this chart just shows changes in enrollment at CMU, both at main campus, undergraduate and graduate, which is obviously down with a little bit of an uptick between 23 and 24. But overall, enrollment's obviously down quite a bit from around 20,000 down to around 14 or 12,000. At the same time, though, the change in the population in Mount Pleasant isn't necessarily what you'd expect just based on decreases in CMU enrollment. So this chart illustrates change in age bracket, groups of folks among different ages that are tracked by the census from 2010 to 2020, some of that period of time where we saw a lot of decline in enrollment at CMU. So the green bars are change in Mount Pleasant population, orange bars are change in population for the entire state of Michigan. So you can see that Mount Pleasant had big drops in college age folks, right? People between under 19 and 20 to 24. What's interesting about this is at the same time, there was a big increase in people between 35 and 44, which you would not necessarily expect if it was just declining enrollment, right? You'd expect those two bars to be where they are and everything else to sort of track with the state or stay relatively stable. So this is really interesting, right? So what that means is you're attracting folks that we in planning sort of lovingly call your family formation years. I'm at the later end of that stage. And that's a really interesting population to be able to attract because we stink at saving money. We want to buy houses. We spend money on our kids for parks and rec programs. And so, it creates a good opportunity to think about kind of the next stage of a master plan update or think about changes to the community is, if that's a trend that continues, is what does it look like to kind of, shift a little bit from being a college town to being a town that's also friendly for, families and folks that are kind of mid-career focused, which is a very different dynamic. So that's something we really wanted to point out when we started this work. There was a lot of conversation about declining enrollment, declining, sort of potential vacancy issues or otherwise on Mission Street. And when we looked at this data, we knew that that wasn't the whole story, that there's something else going on. We also did more work than was in the previous plan on commuting patterns as part of that discussion. So it's a little hard to see here, but the key note to note here is that Mount Pleasant is a regional employment destination. So 12,000 people come into Mount Pleasant to work every day. There are about 2,200 people that live and work here, which is also a really great asset for a community of your size. So about a third of all the people that work in Mount Pleasant or that live in Mount Pleasant that have a job also work in Mount Pleasant. So from a quality of life perspective, you have a lot of folks with a really short commute, which is nice. It's also a nice sort of point of attraction for people if they're considering a place to live. I can live and work in a place, so if I want to ride my bike on a nice day, I actually can, instead of having to jump in the car and drive 30 minutes. The chart at the bottom of the page on the left-hand side just shows the difference between workers that live here in the red bar and jobs. So people that come here to work. And so there are a couple of industries where you have a lot more jobs than you have workers, right? Not surprisingly, educational services and healthcare, your hospital and your university. Those also are opportunities, right, to potentially attract those folks that come here to work to maybe think about living here as you're seeing kind of changing housing dynamics. The one portion of this section we did not change was there was a housing target market analysis done in 2016. We left that in the plan, but we updated it with this 2021 housing gaps analysis that was done by the Michigan State Housing Development Authority across the state, just to sort of give some update and kind of ground truth that those previous projections from 2016. In this case, we compared you to Midland, which again is sort of the closest large, medium-sized city to Mount Pleasant. And you compare pretty favorably, right? Still have lots of demand annually for new owner units, about 80 a year, and lots of interest for renter units. We would put a big asterisk next to that information because 2021 was a really weird year. And so information on housing demand in 2021, we were in COVID, sort of tail end towards the end of the year. But the housing market and dynamics at that point in time were just goofy. And so I think now we're starting to see things maybe finally settle out a little bit. But the key thing to note there is Mount Pleasant's still a place where there's lots of demand for housing. Lastly, just as another thing to sort of point out is changes in household income. So the three bars there going left to right are from 2017 to 2022. So over that 5-year period, what we saw in Mount Pleasant was a slight uptick or an uptick in people that are earning less than $10,000. That likely reflects choices from college students not to have a job, but can't tell you for sure, but that would be my guess if I had to guess. And then general kinds of increases in middle to higher income households. So you see households earning between 75 and 100,000, 100 to 150,000 all increased. And that's likely reflects that change in dynamic where you have more folks in that 35 to 44 range that might have 2 incomes in a household. And so their incomes are a little higher. So I think when we started this plan, this is something that Manuela really wanted us to be sure not to miss throughout all of this. When we started this work, there was a lot of kind of doom and gloom around Mission Street. And when we pulled the demographic information, there was a different story here that wasn't just we're losing students, we're losing economic activity, but actually we're gaining some folks in different demographics and we're seeing some increases in income that could be really positive. So with that, happy to have a discussion about any of this. If you'd like, we can hit on changes to goals and objectives. But again, the goals and objective edits essentially just implement everything we've talked about already in the plan in that section of the document.
My only comment is to encourage our population to frequent the businesses on Mission.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Other comments or questions? Vice Mayor Eke.
Vice Mayor Eke doesn't have a question. I'm fascinated by the data we just looked at.
See, Commissioner Perschbacher? Commissioner Zhang? Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. My computer's locked up, but at this time, is there any additional question or discussion within the commission? Otherwise, I would. Or was that the end? I assumed by the side that was the end of the presentation.
That was, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to step on your toes or anything otherwise. Gotcha. If there's no other discussion to be had amongst the commission, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we accept, what are we doing? Accepting or approve?
It'd be approving the
master
plan for
plan-
the
master
63-day
plan
period.
updates.
Yeah.
So I move that we approve the 2050 master plan updates as presented.
Is there a second?
Support.
Right, there's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. See. Okay. Last one item 21 should be fairly quick. Right now, we're considering appointments to the various boards and commissions as recommended by the Appointments Committee. The Appointments Committee, we had an opportunity to meet this last week this past week it was, to consider additional appointments to the Planning Commission. And we would like to recommend a Mr. Fabian Martinez to the Planning Commission for term expiring December 2027. I spoke with Fabian and a number of his the people who recommended him. Starting off with the people who recommended him, we had several professors and a past employer. One thing I liked from the professor was a political science professor from Montana, actually. They talked about Fabian's ability to disagree with fellow classmates in a very friendly and respectful and collaborative manner. They would do work through other people's presentations and again just like really provide constructive criticism. Talking with their former employer up in Marquette. Fabian was an asset to their team, always very friendly, upbeat, and also brought a lot of experience from really all over the country. They're very well traveled. They've lived in a lot of different places throughout the country. Talking to Fabian, they moved to Mount Pleasant to be closer to family. They just had a 10-month-old child. Well, 10 months ago, they had a child. And they are excited to be raising that child in an area surrounded by family members and in the community. So I think it's a great opportunity to invite a new family or individual at the start of forming a family to give input on the planning in the community. So any questions or discussion on the recommendation there?
Sounds like a good pick.
Yeah. I was pleased talking with them. Being one of the, let's see, if it's all right with you, Mary, I will make the motion to approve Fabian's Martinez as an appointment to the Planning Commission, term expiring December 2027, I believe it is.
I'll support that.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of the appointment, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Okay. See, at this time, we'll move into announcements on city-related issues and new business. Let's see. Commissioner Alsager, do you have any announcements or issues to bring to the commission?
No, I don't.
Gotcha.
I've written one down.
Let's see. Vice Mayor Eke.
I do. I had sent manager to send an email message, and I copied you in the email message to explore the process for having our city named or identified as an international city of peace. So I am bringing that up as something I'm interested in. There are quite a few of them in the country. It means that the city works towards peace and promotes peace activities and recognizes peace as one of its values. I'm interested in that. And I hope that the rest of my colleagues would also join me. But I'd like us to explore that. There are several cities. In fact, I think Traverse City is one of them, possibly Kalamazoo also, and maybe Midland. But there are a number of them in the US. So it's something that we can, look at. So I'm just saying that here so that this goes on record as something I am proposing.
Any questions from the commission on that topic for Vice Mayor Eke?
I like the idea.
Thank you.
I would be supportive of that as well. I think it's, from what I read about it, I think it's a interesting program, and I think again it does highlight the values of our city, as well as historical connections to figures like E.C. Warner from Central Michigan University. So that'd be something I'd be interested in seeing further as well. So,
and the peace event that happens there every May.
That's correct. Let's see, Manager Sense, would you require a motion or anything, or just knowing that there's interest? Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Perschbacher.
I'd like to remind people that when you are riding your bikes on the city streets, the shared streets, that you must still follow the traffic laws that happen out there. Remember to use your hand signals when you're turning and stopping. Remember that when you come to a stop sign, you can't just buzz through. If there's no traffic, you must come to a stop. And that is for the safety of everyone. Also want to remind people every once in a while when I'm driving around, I will see trash cans that will still be sitting by the edge of the road. When your trash service has been completed, you need to move them off the street, move them back onto your property. That just helps keep the streets clean. You've got to remember that there are people that are riding their bikes, sharing the road, and if your trash receptacles are out there, they are in the way. Or if there is a big windstorm, these things can end up being blown across the street, and we don't want to cause any injury or accidents.
Thank you. For myself, I'd just like to remind people that, let's see, it is May 6th. We will be having a special election, in the city of Mount Pleasant. The only item on the ballot will be millages related to the Mount Pleasant Public Schools. Personally, I think it's a great endeavor. I'm excited to be able to vote in favor of that myself personally. But looking again, encouraging people to get out there to vote. Real quick, Clerk Wixon, hate to put you on the spot. Could you remind us of the polling locations within the city that will be open on May 6th?
City polling locations on May 6th will be Ganyard Elementary School on Adams Street, Pullen Elementary School on Brown Street, and Fancher Elementary School on Kinney Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Mayor, I'd like to also remind people with this election, this is a renewal. It is not an increase on anyone's taxes. It's just a renewal. And the school taxes are not, if you have designated your property as a primary residence, you do not pay taxes to the school. It is to secondary residents or businesses. So please remember, this is a renewal. This is not an increase.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's very good information there. Let's see. Commissioner Zhang, any announcements, issues, or new business?
Two things. One is to say thank you to the staff that made that Citizens Academy work. That's a good thing for our community to have that Citizens Academy, and I know it takes some extra work by the staff to make that happen. I thank them, and I would echo what commissioners have already said, that the public schools are vital to our community, and we need to get out and vote. It's a renewal, and the millage is not paid by homeowners. If it's your primary residence, it's not paid by homeowners. There's information available online, so I'd encourage you to be a knowledgeable voter, but get out and vote.
Thank you. All right. At this time, we'll move into public comments on agenda and non-agenda items. If you would like to give comments on anything on the agenda or not on the agenda, please step up to the microphone. You'll be given 5 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Margin Notestein. I live at 1361 South Crawford Street. I haven't been around in meetings lately, but I'm still worried about Vites Woods and the bicycle possibility going through there. I don't know if anything has happened on that score. Maybe I haven't been paying attention. And I do want to have more information about whatever they're proposing from the expressway for an entrance or an exit ramp at the south end of town, because I live at the south end of town, and every time I want to go north on the expressway, I have to go all the way through the city to get on the expressway. So why there isn't some sort of an exit entrance ramp at that south end, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have another in-house.
Hello, I'm Sharon Wisniewski, 2052 McDonald Drive. 3 things. One, I want to thank the city for doing the Citizens Academy. I think it was very valuable to learn about what goes on and what roles we can play and who to see about what and so forth. 2, I wanted to speak in support of this allowing buildings to be set back from Mission. I consider it a safety issue. I used to live in the Metro Detroit area where buildings were right next to the road, and pulling out, I almost got hit several times trying to, as a pedestrian or a bicyclist, because the cars can't see you and they're not looking for you because the buildings are right there. So I think that's good that there can be a little bit of space to see pedestrians and bicyclists coming. And the other is, I don't know the details on the motorized bikes in the city-owned trails, but again, it's a safety issue for me. People walking dogs or having kids, or you've got, ADA kinds of issues. If you've got motorized bicycles, and you talked about, I don't see the scooters, the electronic bikes and stuff stopping at stoplights either, or using hand signals and all that. If they're zipping through, if they are going to be allowed, I suggest they only be on paved areas and maybe only certain trails, and maybe not be allowed to go any faster than what handicap vehicles can go, so that they don't get create a safety hazard for people and animals and children and themselves, for that matter. So, thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Bill Gersmauer, 1514 Gaylord. At the last meeting, I thought I heard something about all the structures in town getting an automatic water meter reader thing, and something being like $7 a structure. Is that going to be, everybody going to be charged that, or is that going to be funded some other way? If I heard correctly.
We can get you some information.
Okay.
Is there anyone else in the audience? Anyone on Zoom? No emails? Okay. This time we're going to close public comments on agenda and non-agenda items. We have 2 work sessions this evening. Would the commission like a recess?
Yes, please.
Gotcha. Would you like 5 or 10 minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. We'll resume at
I'm okay.
we'll resume at 9 o'clock.
Make it on the hour.
first work session that we have on the agenda is a discussion on the draft ordinance of usage of motorized bikes and scooters on city-owned trails. Give Paul a second, take your time.
This is where it's going. Okay, so tonight in your packet, you had the first draft of the bicycle ordinance that talks about obviously totally human powered bicycles and the three classifications of e-bikes. As the draft stands now, and before Vice Mayor Ecke points it out, there are two people is not spelled right here, so I'm just falling on the sword right out of the gate. So I had another person point that out to me, actually. I thought I better get ahead of this before it comes back to bite me. So, as it stands, with this ordinance, it combines, like I said, bikes and then the three classification of e-bikes, 1, 2, and 3. It prohibits bikes on city paths and trails, classification 2 and 3. There is no speed limit that is on paths other than you must use due care and caution, which is clearly spelled out into the ordinance. So there's the other standard, no clinging to vehicles, single rider only, a bike that's designed for one person is meant for one person sort of thing. And hopefully you've read it and have questions, because that's about the gist of it.
Commissioner Alsager, yeah.
So since there's no speed limit attached to it, I think we need some good signage.
Yep.
That would be, slow down, there are pedestrians, some version of that.
Yes, and that was going back to my previous presentation, we talked about increasing the signage as well as the educational PR component of this once we get this ordinance the way we want it.
Yeah, because in addition, we could have on the signage, human powered and class 1 electric.
Only.
Only, so they would be aware of that.
Yes.
Okay.
And we would only have to have those really at the entrances. So it's not like, you gotta have 50 of them.
Right.
So we could definitely do that at the entrances.
That's good.
Question on your thoughts. Most of the bikes, I think class 2 and class 3, my understanding is all electric bikes. You can usually just like turn off the power mode. It could just bike. I might be you could just pedal and everything.
Yep.
So if someone has like one of the band bikes, like a class 2 or 3. Okay, gotcha. I'm not trying to carve out an exception.
No, I get what
I'm
you're
just
saying.
curious of like your thoughts on that, of like how this would be applied.
Yeah, it's a matter of a switch on some of the bikes, and that can be done very quickly if we just kind of nip it at the bud and say no 2 and 3s at this particular point. I think that I'm not advocating for one way or another. I did have a resident call me, and she felt that my presentation previously was advocating for bikes on the path. So I want to be very careful that I'm not coming across as advocating for either way. But I think
starting with just the one classification, if we're gonna start there, if you guys decide to start there, that's a reasonable place to start.
And I think as Commissioner Perschbacher had previously pointed out, it's in line with state, like
That's
what
correct.
state parks has. And then also, one thing I liked about how it was worded, it seemed like it was easy enough that like if we found like 5 years from now that this is just they're running amok and everything, we could easily substitute language to adjust and like tailor down if we wanted to put additional restrictions.
That's correct.
That was the sense that I got from this, so I appreciated that.
I just have a comment. Sometimes for exercise, riding my bike, I travel on Bellows and I have to go through through the north part of campus, connect with West Campus Drive, and then you go past the baseball field and then you're on the Citizens Pathway. And so anyone that wants to bike for exercise, they're probably not going to be on the city park pathways.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Commissioner Zhang?
If there's an accident between this motorized bike, this motorized vehicle and a pedestrian, how does that show an accident report? Is that a vehicle accident or is that a?
Where are you talking that it occurs?
If it's in the park?
In the park, no. It wouldn't be on the pathway, no. Now, if there was injury, that may activate it, yes.
I guess that's what I was referring to.
Yes, if there's injury, yes.
And that's counted as a vehicle, the motorized bike.
It would be counted as a non-traffic area by the state definition. And yes, it would be counted as a vehicle, but in a non-traffic area. So for instance, I know this is gonna sound bad, and I don't want to confuse the public, but a parking lot is a non-traffic area.
Really?
Yes. You can't speed in a parking lot. All right. Now, you can drive carelessly and recklessly, which is a whole host of other problems. So, but by definition, Commissioner Zhang, it's a non-traffic area.
Interesting.
On the street, different story. Just street is fully applicable to vehicle.
Now, in this quote, there's one part that says, yield the right of way to pedestrians approaching on the said sidewalk or sidewalk. That's for the sidewalk part. Is that not for the trails?
No, it's on there for the trails too.
If somebody with a stroller, maybe multiple kids or something was over the center line of the trails, is the obligation of the bicyclist to slow down?
It's the obligation of everyone to ride to the right-hand side, as close to the right-hand side as possible. And in that case, if you were saying, the stroller is going dead center and a bicyclist comes around and collides with the stroller, and to find fault, you'd first have to, look into it. Yeah, is the stroller over the center line or over, operating in the middle? Well, yeah. Should they be operating closest to the right-hand side? Yes. How fast was the bike going? Speed sometimes, not sometimes, speed always on the roadway basically can trump anything if the speed is too great to be able to control that bicycle. So I would assume that the same principle would apply.
Thank you.
So you gotta be in control of your bike at all times.
I did learn one thing in Ann Arbor, where I sometimes ride with my daughter and son-in-law.
Mhm.
There's the border to border trail that's constantly being,
Yeah.
lengthened. And the speed limit there is 10 miles an hour.
Can you tell me if it was posted or not? With signs?
I've not seen it posted.
You have not seen it posted? Okay. How did you know?
My daughter's president of the bike club.
That would do it. That would be a good source of information.
I'm curious.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
So what prompted, I do recall that we discussed, this and during part of the discussion, I think there was something about the speed limit, the already existing speed, speed limit. For
Yes, we had speed limit in the park.
Mhm.
The drives around the park
Okay.
at 15 miles per hour.
Okay.
And if
So
my
this-
memory serves me correctly, I think we talked about making it a blanket of 15 regardless of where you are at,
Mhm, mhm.
whether it's bike or vehicle.
Yeah,
And,
okay.
right now it's due care and caution.
But there's no speed limit here, and that's the question I'm asking. So what prompted
If,
the choice of no speed limit?
it was my understanding that we weren't gonna put in a definitive speed limit. We can certainly do that.
Instead of using what exists as no more than 15.
15, and you're talking about on the paths and trails, or are you talking about around the park with the roads that vehicles travel on?
I'm just talking about a uniform speed limit, both in the parks and here. But I'm curious, I'm just, yeah, because without the speed limit.
Yeah,
what
so
happens?
so my understanding and everything is again like in the like around out and off the trails and
the
everything,
trail.
the current area, it's 15 miles per hour and everything
Correct.
for everything. But we have the option if we wanted to extend that to the trails and the ordinance. How you have it drafted currently, we were just doing due caution without adding that in. But tonight, if we wanted to, we could give more direction to add 15 miles per hour as a speed limit. If that's something that the commission wanted to, was
Exactly correct.
10 miles an hour.
10 miles, yeah, I'll go for
Fast
it.
enough.
Because I've seen people zipping like, like hummingbirds, something like that, so.
I think that would be very hard to enforce.
Right.
It'd be difficult to enforce, but I guess would it help like if we're establishing like the definition of due care and caution, would it be helpful? And I guess as the person who has to deal with complaints and enforcement, would having a speed limit like actually posted like help in enforcement or not or like in resolving like complaints that occur?
I mean, enforcement, that's all part of enforcement, I guess, and it's no different than on the roadway.
Okay.
You gotta be in the right place at the right time. How much resource or how many of the officers or resources are you gonna put into it? And then at the end of the day, it would be a municipal civil infraction. And then, I mean, I'm not even getting into, my son riding his dirt bike, pedal bike, that is, responsibility and whatnot. But certainly if the desire is you want a number, the ordinance is easily changed to do that.
I guess to the commission, would there be any harm in putting in like a defined speed limit? If we're not heavily enforcing it, if we're not directing officers to go out and again heavily enforce it. Yeah.
I like the way it is now with just saying due care and caution.
Okay.
And I'm not doubting at all when I make my next statement that people have been buzzed or there's been close calls Certainly, and that can be scary in its own right. You know, you're out there enjoying the walk, you're relaxed, you know, you're looking at birds and whatnot, and then, you know, you get buzzed or, you know, almost get hit. I certainly appreciate that. We have not had any huge incidents whatsoever that come to my mind where someone on those trails was hit by a bike. We've had a few complaints on close calls, but you guys are aware of those. So to pinpoint that because there was no number attached to the previous ordinance, it would just be the decision to do that now. I don't have anything, no data to support that necessarily, other than if that's the direction you give me.
Other questions, comments?
Just a comment, and I think this is well written, but the comment would be as we go through these things, we need to make sure that we revisit the non-motorized plan of the master plan that was just put up there in a screen that said something different from this, just so we revisit. And the other thing is, when it comes down to the CIP and we tie into the south end at Bites Woods, you know, has there been discussions already with CMU about motorized vehicles on that property?
That would be for Director Biscorner. That would be a question for him.
I think, yeah, we could definitely.
It's not even a question, it's rather, we need to be.
We would explore that as we move forward with that project, yeah, because there are other implications because it's a university property. I see what your point's taken there, yeah. Let's see, is there any other comments or questions? I think from Commissioner Alsager, I would be comfortable. She's the bike expert amongst us, so I'd be comfortable with Duke here.
One other question, and I haven't been on one, so I don't know, but do most of these motorized bikes have speedometers on them?
I think maybe the upper classes do, but I don't think class 1 does. I know the electric scooters do not. Or wait, do they?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I have someone I can ask. I
don't
have a friend who
remember.
has one.
No,
I can ask her.
I'm just, because I had, when I was testing them out the other day, no, I was using a laser gun, so.
The scooters or the bikes?
The scooter, yeah, the scooters. We were going through the
stock that was provided.
Yeah, the licensing evaluation.
How fast did you get going?
Some of them 14, 15. Now, there was comments made that my weight wasn't helping things, so they put a lighter officer on there and it went 16, so.
And would you be comfortable at that speed being on a city park pathway?
Maybe on those wheels are too small. No.
Yeah.
How often do you ride a scooter?
Not very.
There's a lot of people around here that ride scooters daily
Mhm.
to get around town.
Mhm.
And they know exactly how to handle them.
Absolutely.
Okay. With that, we're in a work session. There's no motion, but I think it's comfortable with the
Yeah.
ordinance that's been presented. Thank you for the good
Well
work on
done.
and bringing this back to us.
Thank you.
And I'll make sure that people is changed and spelled right.
You get absolutely no comments from me. You're correct, self-correcting, that's the thing.
Thank you, Director Loria. Okay, we'll move on to item number 23 then, discussion on 2026-2031 capital improvement plan.
I do apologize. Give me just a moment to get it pulled up here.
It's an interesting picture.
That's not Mount Pleasant.
No, it is not.
Is it loaded on this computer? I apologize. I'm fairly new to pulling it up on here.
I think it is.
I can, yes.
I think it is loaded up.
It's closed.
Do I?
No, 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 no. On your
Yeah.
Windows.
Yeah, I think I'm in my email, but it's gonna reload anyway for me, so. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. It's time to talk about the capital improvement plan for 2026 through 2031. Tonight's presentation will mostly focus on the projects that are planned for 2026, and they're about to begin the process of creating the 2026 operating budget. So it's important that we understand the projects we are committing to and including them in the budgeting process. If there are projects that the commission wants modified, removed, or added, we would appreciate knowing sooner rather than later so we can incorporate the changes into the budget process. In this presentation, we'll also note changes from the prior plans within the presentation, provide basic updates on the projects planned planned and in process for 2025, touch on the projects planned for 27 through 31, and highlight the next steps in the CIP process. The characteristics of a CIP project include original construction or subsequent improvements, equipment that has an estimated useful life of 10 years or more. The cost is at least $20,000, and it could be projects that are spanning several years. When constructing the CIP, we look at many sources to gather the input when deciding what projects need prioritization. The sources leveraged for this purpose of planning projects include the city commission goals, the master plan, the Parks and Recs master plan, the tax capture district plans, PACER ratings, and sidewalk and alley inventory. The cash flow projections on page 3 through 9 of your of the large packet you received has a few different purposes. It summarizes everything in the plan in just a few pages. It makes it easy to evaluate the financial impact and timing of the proposed projects by fund to help ensure that we have adequate reserves in place for future projects. Some projects are reliant on grant funding and donations, and other projects can be impacted by future bonding and project consolidation. Key considerations for the projects and determining the timing of completing them is the affordability, the reserve need, and if the grants and donations to assist with the projects, and if there are any time constraints on those grants for use of those funds. Here I put together a list of some of the projects that are planned to be completed within the 2025 year. Some projects have been completed, some are currently in process, and others will still need to be started, but they are at least on the radar. So this is everything that is currently worked into the 2025 budget. In the next slide, I'll start going into the 2026 budgets by departments, so you'll get a better look at some of those. First up, we have the buildings department with $1,466,000 worth of projects. The first project is windows and door replacement for $66,000, and the synopsis for this is on page 18 of that packet. And it's to install new windows at the city hall due to the current windows from 2007 showing signs of deterioration. The other project is $1.4 million, and that's on page 14 for the synopsis. It includes the replacement of both the east and west historical walls, the short wall, and the adjacent sidewalk and streetscape. The city clerk's project for $120,000 is to replace the election equipment. We currently have 8 machines that will no longer meet the standards required by the state and federal government as of 2026, and they need to be replaced. We have our downtown projects for $296,000 in total. We have an alleyway renovation for $266,000, that's on page 22. And it's related to the alleyway between Michigan and University and has been delayed until 2026 due to the easement determination there. The downtown improvement program for $30,000 on page 24 is a continuation of the repair and replacement of the amenities based on the location and the need. This includes landscaping, trash cans, electrical outlets, benches, bike racks, and other such items. The parks projects comes to $2,949,000. One of the projects on here is the Chippewa River Bank Protection for $610,000, and that's on page 34. It includes the Mill Pond Dam repair and the pedestrian bridge abutment protection. We also have a medium-sized project for $54,000 on page 36. And this is for a roof replacement to the Chippewa Waters restroom and shelter. The Mid-Michigan GKB pathway connection for $2.1 million on page 38 accomplishes several purposes, including adding trail connections to the GKB Riverwalk Trail to Mission Creek Park and completing a needed connection with Union Township. The playground equipment and universal access for $40,000 on page 42 is a continuation of the universal access to Island Park per ADA transition plan. The renovation of the park roads, lots, and trails for $145,000 on page 44 is for a mill and overlay of Nelson Park and Park Shop area parking lot. The public works projects that we have are for $329,000 in total. There's a sidewalk replacement project for $150,000 on page 48, and that is to cover the replacement of sidewalks in various locations based on complaints and/or PACER ratings. We also have the storm sewer collection system improvement project for $179,000 on page 50, and this is for the engineering and drainage improvements on Franklin from Preston to Bellows. We have airport projects totaling $3,430,000. This is a runway rehabilitation program for $3.2 million, and that's on page 54. And it'll require the removal and replacement of the current pavement. We also have a snow removal equipment project for $230,000 on page 55. And it's for the purpose of purchasing a broom to replace the 20-year-old equipment that's currently in use for that. We don't have any projects planned in 2026 for local streets. There is $2,107,000 in major streets. And this includes resurfacing and reconstruction projects totaling that amount. And you can find the list of them on page 63. There's currently, I believe, about 5 sections of road that'll be worked on in that year. The projects for the water department are total $568,000. There's a chemical feed pump replacement on page 67 for $40,000. And that is to replace the sodium hydroxide and ferric chloride chemical feed pump. The distribution system replacement on page 70 for $60,000 is to replace some system valves and to ensure the reliability of the system as a whole. There is a meter replacement project on page 76 for $348,000. This accounts for the water portion of the meter replacement program that is shared with the water resource recovery facility over the next 4 years. This is to replace the current meters with new meters that will increase the accuracy and availability of real-time data while reducing the reliance on manual data collection and entry. And you'll see this project is noted on the water resource recovery facility projects as well for the same amount as is a shared project. The source water equipment recovery or replacement on page 79 for $120,000 is for the rehabilitation based on the results of the inspection based on the results of the inspection and the Rainy recharge panel dredging. The last department that I have projects for 2026 is the water resource recovery facility for $797,000. And this includes the facility improvements project on page 82 for $275,000. And it's to replace the flare for the digester waste gas. The lift station improvements project on page 84 for $74,000 is for either a complete rebuild or a replacement of both storm pumps at Pickard. Again, this also does cite the meter replacement project and the $348,000 share that the water resource recovery facility has. And that's on page 86. And the final project listed here is reconstruction and relining project for $100,000 on page 87. And that is for the clay tile sewer lining as needed. Future years, so if we look beyond 2026, in 2027 through 31, we have some more projects. It's easily looked at on pages 3 through 9 of your page on there, so you can see those. The projects include, but are not limited to, street reconstruction, sidewalk replacements, sewer and water line replacements, park and trail maintenance, and building maintenance. There's also noted some future projects in that time period that are one-time projects. They include and are not limited to the vehicle storage, the next part of the mid-Michigan GKB pathway connection, and the airport runway rehab. A couple of notes that I wanted to make on some of the projects that are on that list. I'd like to highlight the Mid-Michigan GKB pathway connection project and the costs for both 2026 and 2028. Currently, the funding for the 2026 has been determined and is leveraging grant dollars heavily through grants that have already been secured. The 2028 portion of the project would require grant funding to ensure the completion of but it cannot be requested until we use the current funding from 2026. This project could change in timing and scope dependent on the availability of the grant funding and match needed for the funding for that. Also, future conversation may need to be had about the level of funding associated with the storm sewer fund. The projects impacting this fund are directly tied to the major and local streets project. Due to the funding constraints, some streets projects are delayed or modified, leaving funding accumulating in the storm sewer fund that cannot be used timely. Redistribution of some of the funds for the storm sewer into major local streets would be a conversation that we may need to have sometime. Lastly, there's a significant number of water projects requested from 2026 through 2031. The projects are noted in later years could potentially be included in the phase 2 of bonding for the water plant infrastructure improvement project. And this could significantly impact the timeline and scope of those projects.
Could you just repeat the portion on the street and storm sewer funding? I apologize.
Basically what's going on with the storm sewer fund has projects that are directly tied to the major and local street projects. Due to funding constraints for some of the street projects, they're delayed and modified, leaving the funding that's accumulating in that storm sewer side of things that can't be spent as it's being accumulated, so it does get a significantly high balance in there. So that's something that we just may want to look at and make sure that the allocation for that fund is matching up the projects that we need there, and potentially looking at redirecting some of that funding to accomplish some of those other projects we have on the list related to the streets.
I'm gonna, can I ask a question? Sure. So I just want to make sure that I understood what you're saying. You're saying to us that there is an accumulation of funds related to the storm sewer project, because that project is connected to the street.
Correct.
Okay, so we're not using the storm sewer funds at all? We're not doing anything with that, or are we not doing enough with it?
We are doing projects that relate with the storm sewer funding as they're needed as they can time them out with the local and major streets. But we do get a backlog of the funding in the storm sewer side of things that we cannot use because we have to push or delay some of the major street projects due to the funding amount.
Okay, that's the part that I needed to clearly understand. So now what you're asking us to do is to consider the possibility of moving some of those funds to address the need in other, whatever you're calling it, minor streets or something like.
That is something that I'm prepping you for the conversation to be had later.
I see. Okay. All right. So it's anticipatory, right?
Yes.
Okay.
This may be something that when we're looking at the budget or some other future step on that side of things, that we might be looking at that.
All right. Okay.
So the last couple slides I do have on table 6 on page 94, the projects that are not currently planned in our capital improvement projects, they were identified as possible future projects. They may not be in the plan because of the funding constraints. For example, is the runway extension project, or because they don't have enough information to place them in the plan at this time. And this would be related to like the Mount Pleasant Center infrastructure side of things, which I know had some other hangups related to that's still being worked through. So the next steps that the next steps in the CIP process, there is the work session tonight that we're currently working through. And I will be presenting this plan to the Planning Commission on Thursday, May 1st. If needed, there is a second work session that can be had on May 12th. We're scheduling the public hearing for the CIP on May 27th. And the charter requires us to adopt the plan by June 9th. And we will be presenting the 2026 operating budget that incorporates the 2026 projects on September 8th. Are there any other questions on the CIP projects?
Oh, Commissioner Alsager.
Mine's just a comment. I've looked through these for some number of years now, and I appreciate that some of the departments that need big things every year, you're going to come back every year and say, this is how much they need this year. And then there's some others that we need money this year, and then we might need it in 3 years. I just like the way it's all spelled out.
I would have to thank my predecessor for setting it up nicely for me.
Yeah.
Commissioner Enke.
So the Mid-Michigan GBK pathway connections, you did say something just very briefly about it. I mean, this comes up, well, a number of them come up, but I'd like to again be reminded of what sections we're looking at.
North part.
For that, I will have to default to Phil to know what sections they're looking at for the sections of the pathway connections for 2026 versus 2028.
Yeah.
So the 2026 pathway is going from Nelson Park north to Mission. The 28 pathway is going south out of Right now, it's the Chippewas, but we'll have that discussion at a later date.
Okay, okay,
We're-
okay. All right, yeah. I know that there were two sections. I just needed to make sure, I'm thinking correctly.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Last question I ask, if
While you have
nobody's
the floor,
asking.
yeah.
Okay, so we just put in request for 2% money, right? So how would that impact? Does that have any impact on what you have here right now? Just hypothetically. If we got some of those. Manager dissents, may I ask Manager dissents?
Yeah, we had, I'm trying to recall, I'd have to pull up the exact list to have them side by side, but I know in terms of projects that we had applied for, we had applied for funding for some of the parks projects. We had applied for funding for some sidewalks and also for some of the airport projects as well, too.
So those are the ones that would be affected. I
They
think
could-
that was the one with the DPS also. Wasn't there something with DPS? I don't know.
Nothing that's in the CIP for 2026.
For DPS. Okay. All right. Okay. Laura, I'm always looking out for you, right?
Looking next to Commissioner Perschbacher
Thank
or
you.
Zhang. Either comments? Commissioner Zhang?
I would encourage the commission to read the second page carefully on this CIP. Because it's saying that we're going to fall short, we're pushing things back. We're going to see conditions of the infrastructure declining. And we hope that we're going to get some other funding, but the issue for us should be we need to watch our spending. I don't want to micromanage where the staff is saying this is the most important thing. We just need to look at the bottom line here. And what I'm seeing on this, the summary of this concerns me.
Thank you, Commissioner Zhang. Commissioner Perschbacher, I think I saw. Questions. I had a couple questions. Let's see. Yeah, so kind of going off of Commissioner Zhang's comment, I was looking at first the second page of the memo where it was just talking about or excuse me, the first page of the memo. City of Mount Pleasant's infrastructure continues to age, resulting in growing maintenance needs. Now, this is something we've been aware of for a while, but just like I was just going over the context of it. Are we looking at like a glut of infrastructure all at once that's aging, like a cohort, or is it more of just like, again, these are just costs and we've had to push things back over time, or is it like we did like 50 years ago, we did a ton of infrastructure projects all at once?
Yeah, you do have some of that going out in the system. I know Director Biscorner essentially mentioned that in parks, where it seemed like everything in parks was built all within a very short period of time. So you do have that issue in parks. We've discussed in the past as well too, and this is something we still have to get our hands around more, but some of that AC pipe as well too. There's a condition assessment that has to take place there and some concerns around that. With that on our radar, that could bring forward some additional costs out there in the system, but you have significant portions of the city that were built up. Every city has this though, where you have faster pace of development and then some slowed down periods. And if I had to guess, it probably had to do with some of what was going on in the economy at the time, where you may have had a fast paced build in the 1970s and a slowdown in the 80s as inflation started rising, and then a big fast paced build in the 2000s, and then a slowdown during the recession. So you just have those kind of waves in any town out there. So the city's no different than that.
Gotcha. Let's see.
Fair.
Yeah.
Along that comment, and this is just one example because there's lots of them in here, but if you look at 48, you read the comment at the bottom of the page. This was highlighted for me when I recently visited the university. But if you read that last page, it says we're going to estimate need 290,000 annually. And you can see from the CIP that we're close to that for the 6 years we're planning. So that's going to mean that infrastructure is deteriorating, and it continue to deteriorate, and we're not funding the maintenance of it. But it's that kind of thing that's pointed out on that page too, that we need to be careful of in terms of our spending and where that money gets allocated to. What's the most important thing to us? Because we're not gonna make it if we keep spending more than we get.
Appreciate that. Thank you for pointing that out, and just like that context there between that and that project, and like balancing act of like priorities and everything. So it's funding where we can, but I appreciate that. Thank you. Let's see, I have other questions unless anyone else wants to jump in. Yeah, Vice Mayor Eke.
I do recall just that you talked about, the discrepancy between the funding for the water treatment and, what is it? And what is awarded, right? So you're saying here actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, paragraph 6, paragraph 6 at page 2, it says the city's total need for funding for water treatment plant upgrades exceeds the amount awarded by almost 25 million. How are we doing that?
I believe we had spoken, we've already discussed this when we agreed to do the construction.
I know, but she's cautioning us too about that. So how do we address this then?
That certainly is a concern, although I would be less concerned about that because that's a utility. It's not going to come out of the general fund. There might be some general fund money to see us over some humps there, but that's going to be covered as a utility by revenue from the water system. But like anything, it's a concern that we just have to watch because that's an indication of the kind of thing we're up against. But at least in my opinion, that's probably a lesser concern than some of the others.
Jumping to page 68 of the packet. I think we caught a note from Director Moore in there on the printed packet. It was on the clarifier rehabilitation. Composite 2022 was 108,000. Why so much more? 2026. It was just it's printed in the packet there. I was just curious on that one there. Or at the very least, just making sure we edit it before it's the final draft. I see JM1, so that's where my assumption was Director Moore.
When I put the packet together, I believe you have one that has a red highlighted box on it. Yep. That was, I thought I corrected that before I got the packets around, but that was a note that we took out.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, and then just going back to storm, just again clarifying on storm sewer funding. Just again making sure I'm understanding there. A lot of the storm sewer funding, because the pipes and the storm sewer lie beneath the street, we can't actually utilize the funding in the storm sewer fund to replace the pipes because we're not using the funding. There's no funding in the streets to tear up and replace the street. I'm getting nods. Okay, gotcha. Yes. So it's not putting off work or degrading our ability to upgrade the storm sewers. It's just addressing the fact that we can't get to the pipes. Yeah.
Because the other work has
Subject matter.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
If we've been focusing a lot on overlays and mill and overlays, so we're not on those streets, we're not doing storm sewer replacements because we're not tearing up the streets. So we don't have that many reconstructs in the plan coming up other than Franklin, and Franklin might be the only one in the next 5 years. So that's why we're not using as much of the storm money right now. But we do have a section of storm sewer that we'll replace when we do Franklin, and then I think Oak Street will probably be the next one that we do. So that's why some of those funds are building up right now, because we haven't been doing as much storm sewer since we're not tearing the streets up.
We are running into a situation though where we have to keep pushing back those reconstructs because we don't have enough funding because of the Act 51 situation. That formula doesn't, because the population decrease, we're not getting as much Act 51 funding. And so we keep pushing those reconstructs back And again, focusing more on the overlays, and yeah, there's not really an opportunity to do the storm sewer underneath those overlays, so.
Gotcha.
And of course, that will mean that over time, the condition of the streets are going to worsen. And the storm drains underneath those streets won't be fixed until we get to that point.
Yeah, we suspect that that's why we're giving you the heads up, is that it may be that it'll behoove us to start putting some of that storm sewer funding toward the streets, because if there's a lack of funding there, I mean, the state, it seems like the state is continually talking about how they're gonna fix this funding situation, but you know, I guess don't hold your breath.
Bringing it back to Director Pavlovsky, your realm of expertise, street funds are their own independent fund currently, if I'm not mistaken. Like we have like a fund set up for streets. It's not just from the general fund.
We do get money in from other sources related directly to the streets funds.
Okay.
That can
gotcha.
only be spent on streets.
Okay, and storm sewer funds, those are
It
things
goes
that
from the
we,
general fund.
from the general fund. So again, those are funds we could move around if we needed to. Okay, gotcha. All right. That wraps up most of my questions. It's a very thorough packet here. Thank you. Let's
Thank
see.
you.
Other questions from the rest of the commission before we close it up?
Escape, come, just escape quickly.
Gotcha.
No, thank you.
There's no other discussion concerning the capital improvement project. In that case, there's no other items on the agenda. I do this week have my orange paper in front of me, a motion to adjourn. I can just adjourn the meeting if there's no further discussion. So with that,
Closed session.
huh?
No.
There's no closed session this evening.
Well, this work session, never mind.
Yeah, this is the last work session. So with that, we are adjourned at 9:52.
You,
Good work.
good night, everyone.